You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hey, everybody, this is Doug Thorpe again, and this is another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I have a very special privilege today. I've got a gentleman who is fast becoming a friend, not only a colleague, but his name is Mark Faris. I had the great privilege of being on his podcast not long ago, and we were able to quickly schedule him on my booking and get him in to share his story. He's got some great insights and ideas that he's going to share with us. But with that, Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Doug, great to be here. I enjoyed our last conversation, and I found myself trying to holy geez, I got to cut this because this is going a lot longer than I needed. And I get my executive assistant there. She always gets on me. Make sure you don't go too long on it. So I really enjoyed our last conversation. I'm glad we were able to book something where we can continue the conversation here, Doug.
Likewise, and I've got a feeling that we're going to find opportunity. We'll have the same problem here. I think we're going to run out of time before we run out of things to talk about. But so let's start by, I alluded to a couple of things, but give people an idea of where you are now, what you're doing, and a little bit about the journey to get there.
Yeah, so currently right now I'm running two companies. We have a real estate team / brokerage is what, so we help people buy and sell homes north of Toronto. So we do approximately about 1,000 sales a year. We do over $1 billion in sales volume. We run it as a real estate team. Everything is under my name. And that started back in 2007. And so we also run, the second company is Faris Capital Partners, where we partner with investors and we buy multifamily properties in the Southeast. 100 units plus is what we'll go after. We'll buy value add B-class buildings. We'll go in, we'll improve operations. We'll renovate them over a period of 2 to 3 years. And then we look to exit in that 3 to 5 year time frame. So more deal flow is happening now than within the last 12 months, which is great news. We have a full-time team of about 100 on the real estate brokerage side, and we have 8 full-time team members over on Faris Capital, and so we oversee over 100 million in assets under management on the capital side. So, Doug, though, it was a little bit of a journey getting there, and maybe I'll fill you in on kind of how it started.
Yeah.
So, I grew up on a farm north of Toronto, so we. Farmer growing up, picking rocks. My dad would get the wagon out and we'd go pick rocks in the field for all the farm boys out there. You know what I'm talking about is just, we grew up with, strong values. And that's probably one of the reasons why I resonate with you so much is just straight down to earth. I love your story with how you were raised by your mom and how she instilled those values into you, as your listeners would be able to say and allude to there. So, and my dad, he would flood the barns in the wintertime for us. And so he'd flood them, and so we could go and skate. And eventually what he did is he put boards up, and so we wouldn't be crashing into the posts as I did a few times. And so that helped us. And over the years, I was just going out there and I was practicing every day. And so I developed through the ranks with hockey. I played a couple seasons over in Sweden, down in the States in the Central League, actually in Texas, McAllen, I played a little bit, and then put on waivers. Walked in one day and my stuff was in a garbage bag, and they said, "Here's 2 plane tickets back. Here's one for you and your wife. Flight is in a few hours, so we're gonna need to move fairly quick here." So that was you quickly learn that hockey is like any business. It is a business, and but when one door closes, another one opens, and flew back and was trying to figure out what it was that I was going to do. A lot of the teams had picked their own players. And Joanna said to me one day, my wife, she said, "Mark, you don't have to keep playing hockey if you don't want it." And I don't know, Doug, if you've ever had this, but it was like this light bulb, these blinders fell off. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Real estate. I want to get into real estate. I always loved real estate investing. I thought, what better way to become a great real estate investor than to become a real estate agent? And so I was like, okay, was done with hockey, jumped into real estate. 6 months later, had my license. And the first 6 months, Doug, was tough. We maxed out our credit cards. We were $10,000 in credit card debt. I remember calling Joanna's father at one point and saying, can we borrow $1,000 for a week? We have a check coming in, and he was gracious, and he lent that, and then we paid that back a week later. But then I picked up this book after 6 months in of struggling. It didn't really set a strong goal, and picked up this book, Think and Grow Rich. And Napoleon Hill talked about writing down your goals, getting clear. I took a 9-week accountability course as well around that period. And that next year, set a goal for 38 sales, or for 40 sales. I did 38. And then I was maxed out. And so like most business owners, they get maxed out doing everything on their own. And that's where we brought on somebody, and we went from 38 sales. So my wife was doing the marketing, I was doing the sales. And we brought that one person on. We went from 38 to 100. And at that point, I was like, because 100 was the goal, and that's what we hit. I was all in on two things, Doug. I was all in on hiring great people, because we went from 38 sales being max with me and Joanna to 100 with one more person. So the investment was phenomenal. But the other thing was setting goals really does work. And so I went from 38 to 100, 160 to 222 to 340 to 450 to 560 to 813 to 1,000 sales. We scaled up. And it was interesting. At that point, I was doing 150 sales personally, leading the team doing 1,000. And we started hitting the ceiling. And what ended up happening then, it was like, why on earth are we hitting the ceiling? It was about 3 years in a row we hit 1,000. We couldn't break through. And that's where it was clear to me. I was like, you know what? I need to figure out what's the role of a CEO? Like, I had no idea. I was leading the team. We were doing, about $1 billion in sales volume a year. And, for all people looking at it, it's like, you're successful, but why were we hitting a ceiling? And I couldn't figure it out. So I transitioned out of selling into the full-time CEO role. We hired a really strong sales manager. And then we went from 1,000, we just broke through, and then 1,400, and then 1,700 sales. And so we scaled it up again. And then COVID hit, and that's when I'd been investing in real estate all along, but then deals dried up. Investment deals dried up north of in Toronto. Pricing grew, interest rates doubled, deals didn't make sense anymore. So we actually picked up and we moved our family. So we're down in Naples, Florida now, still running the business. We have strong leadership up in Canada. And when I came down here, I'm like, wow, real estate investing down here is a whole other game. And then that's when I started looking into the larger multifamily space. And that's when we said, okay, we're going to open this up to other investors. And then we built a team. As you know, John came on as my partner, John McKerowitz. And then we scaled that team up. And so pretty much we run the two companies side by side, although they're two different entities. And, that's where we're at in today's, but it was definitely a journey to get there.
Well, a couple of highlights I want to hit on. Number one is that revelation you had of realizing to bust through that plateau or that ceiling or wall, whatever you want to call it, at 1,000. You realized you had to explore this concept of being a CEO, not just a producer. And I think that's such a critical message for any founder entrepreneurs out there in particular. And it even is true in a fashion for those who have risen the corporate ladder and gotten up to a certain level, and you're feeling the push that there's some kind of friction, there's some kind of rub here, but nobody's told me what it is. Inevitably, what it is that very thing you're talking about. You've got to stop worrying about individual contribution production-wise, and you have to start thinking more strategically for the benefit of the team and the bigger, I call it the greater good that you're trying to serve. You just got to bust through that mindset that says, no, I got here because I worked hard and I could pound it out of the park, But that is such a critical first step in making that next level growth advancement for a business.
Yeah, 100. And it was tough. I mean, it was tough for me to take a step back at that point because I had my self-worth based on the activity that I was doing. And it would totally went against the grain of what I was used to, because I was more like lead by follow me. Okay, I'm out there selling 150 homes, and but when you take a step back from sales, it's like there's a lot of, we'll say, quiet time that needs to happen. There's a lot of meetings that people don't see. And so that was an ego check for me. I had to like bury the ego and say, you know what, the company needs me to do this. And what was also interesting is that I needed to learn and go back to the basics and learn the basics of what my job actually is. What is the scorecard of a CEO? And I didn't know. And it was such an interesting, I was doing it. I was leading, but I couldn't really quantify what I should be doing on a day-to-day basis. And that journey was really, it was scary at the beginning in a way, because I had to like lower my ego to go back to, okay, I got to start at the basics. And then we started at that point slowly delivering and introducing the scaling tools. And I got into the whole scaling up by Vern Harnish, EOS traction, Jim Collins, Good to Great, building a strong leadership team, management team, the daily huddles, the weekly leadership, level 10 meetings, the quarterly meetings. Like we started creating structure within the business, because up until that point, there was a lot of, we'll say, noise from, like the telephone game, right? Like one person tells another person, but then the third person doesn't hear. And so, but when you introduce these regular meeting cadences, communication flowed a lot better. Accountability was much stronger, because they need to report on a daily basis. And a lot of the drama started to subside, but it wasn't an overnight thing. It was first me getting my head wrapped around, okay, I need to learn this new skill. And then it was to start introducing it to the team, where there's always a lot of pushback at the beginning when you start introducing anything new. So it took a lot of grittiness to be able to enforce that into the company, until the point that they saw like, oh, this is really helping us. We see fruit from that.
Well, I'm going to say something that may become a flashpoint for some, but I certainly don't mean any disrespect by it. What I'm going to say is, in my experience, when I have come across the really effective sales leaders, I mean, the guys and gals that can go out and sell ice cream to Eskimos, as they say, there's not a great correlation between them becoming good leaders. Because it's definitely something in the DNA and the personality traits, all of those things that do allow them to be amazing sales generators. But that doesn't always transfer over into leadership without some really hard work. And I think that's kind of what you're describing there. And like I say, I mean, absolutely no disrespect to those folks that are top of the game in whatever sector or industry doing revenue generation via direct sales. And, that's a tough game. I mean, not everybody's cut out for it by any means. And the ones that really rise up, that top 10% that really land the big numbers, they don't always make that transition into a leadership role.
Well, it's interesting, going back to the hockey analogy, you don't see a lot of like superstars that become great coaches. It's generally like the fourth line players that tend to do really well as the coach, because they can resonate more with the fourth line, and they can also show respect and see the need for the first and second lines as well. I think if you are an outstanding, from a performance standpoint, you really got to, I guess, you got to have a more patience to look at, say, the fourth line or somebody maybe that's not performing at your level, still have high expectations, but to be able to empathize with them and coach them up and have the patience. Because I think like the top performers, from what I've seen from a sales standpoint, is like it comes so natural to them. That's like, of course, like, why don't you just do it? Just go and do this. But I think that as a leader, for me, what I've had to do is really like take a step back and have more patience. And what's helped me get past that is hiring really strong managers that are way more patient than I am, and really strong senior leaders that are really good at having that longer term patience. So I try not to stick too long with the management. I try to to grow the company to the point where I can where we can have enough support or enough income coming in that I can hire that mid-level manager that they can then coach them up.
Yeah. Well, and that's certainly a strong, powerful approach to it, and it is necessary if you truly are going to grow and scale your business. There is just no way that owner founder can be, the main guy. I say for those guys, the title CEO means chief everything officer, and that's not good. But,
Yeah, for sure.
When you are putting on your own shoulders the everything part of the business, that's not scalable and it's not sustainable either.
Well, for me personally, I'm more of a visionary, Doug. And so my strength is getting something going, like the first 40%. Like I'm good. I'll put that muscle in at the beginning. I'm excited. Let's go. But then, like John McCarowitz that came on as my partner with Faris Capital, he is more of the integrator where he'll take it from 40% and he'll finish it. And he'll love taking that and finishing it off and finishing the last 10%. And so that's where, as a CEO, I find many of them, not all, but many of them are visionary leaders. And I think that if they can find their integrator, I know Rocket Fuel is a really good book that hit home for me by Gino Wickman. That really okay, I get why an integrator, somebody that's super detailed oriented, they like the details and they like the process part of it. Why somebody like that would be a good complement to the visionary side. And so that's where my suggestion would be is if you're a leader, try and figure out if you're more of a visionary or an integrator. Some are both. But if you could figure out what that is, and it really helps you with, if you are going to hire that next person, what will complement and allow you to kind of move faster.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. And I too, I'm a fan of that book and the work Gino did in that space. There's an interesting side story with Gino's journey. Gino Wickman is the kind of the creator of this whole EOS phenomenon that's going on in small business. And of course, the book is called Traction, where he introduces the system. And EOS does stand for Entrepreneur Operating System. So for those who maybe haven't heard it or thinking about it, very powerful, a lot of good discipline. But one thing that was a natural segue. He realized in his own work that when you're talking to entrepreneurs, there is this phenomenon of visionary versus integrator. And there are entrepreneurs that are, in fact, integrators. They have a vision, but it's maybe half of what a true visionary's vision might be. And like you take a visionary example like Steve Jobs, the story is legend now. He didn't say, I want to build computers. He said, I want to change the way humans interface with technology. And that's that hairy, big, audacious vision. And then you start solving backwards and say, well, how does that work? What can we do? Well, the technology resides in these boxes that some are big and some are small, but is that a good interface? Is that a good way? And then, one thing led to another. So it's that vision that kind of gets people going. And I agree totally with you. If someone is listening out there that has this idea, maybe you've already started the business and you're moving along, you're creating some market response. You've got to check yourself along the way. Can you continue to be the integrator as well as visionary? And the likely answer is not really.
Yeah, and it's tough to make the change. And I look back on, it was interesting, Doug, a few days ago, funny enough, I was doing this little exercise in from where I started from the hockey player, then I had to learn to become a real estate agent. And then I got better at becoming an agent, but then I needed to learn how to lead other salespeople. So then I needed to document all my processes and presentations and scripting, and then I needed to learn how to train them to do it. And then the next thing was the CEO. We talked about that journey, transitioning into that. I had to learn that, and then diving in more into the investment firm side. Then I had to learn that side and go deeper on, cross border. What does that look like when you're investing? And every single time, it's interesting. You got to go back and it's like, okay, I'm really good at this over here, but the company, the vision, as you had said, like with Steve Jobs, it's forcing me, or it's calling me to wear a different hat and learn a new skill set. And that can be scary for some people, and it's definitely uncomfortable going in and learning that. But I think if you do that, that's what will allow the company to grow and scale. As you had mentioned, the chief everything officer, I think that does apply, because there are some seasons that the company needs you to go and do something and conquer that big, we'll say, that constraint in the business to free it up to be able to move the company along.
Well, I agree, and I like what you said there and the way you said it. And I also want to add another caveat to all of that. You were describing your journey of realizing the different areas that you might have to learn to take the vision to the next level. Mixed in that swirl is also the very real possibility that the guy who is founder CEO needs to stop doing that and instead go find somebody that already knows how to do that and bring them onto the team and let that person be responsible for building that element of the long-term vision you're trying to create.
Yeah, I think that is such a valid point, because that's actually been something that I've had to learn as well through the years. That's an easy miss. It's like, okay, the company needs me to go do this over here, but you are filling a role right now and you need to fill it. You got to slow down and say, okay, what am I currently doing? And I got to make sure I have somebody come in and not just abdicate the role, but you like delegate it. What I mean by that is not just like, okay, you got it. Okay, bye. I'm out of here. It's okay. Here's how I'm doing. And there's this whole rollout plan as to them taking over what you currently do. I think that is where you start to get gaps or holes or things start to fall apart. So I really like how you added that, because that is important, that you get a really strong leader that can take and hold that weight that you are currently and then move on to the next step and continue to do that.
Well, and doing these things we're talking about is directly related to the proverbial bright, shiny object syndrome. That's another thing entrepreneurs are guilty of doing frequently, is taking a look at things that are emerging in the market, and maybe truly the market is shifting some way, and you realize there's yet another solution or another opportunity. And you can rationalize and say, yeah, that fits with what we're doing. That would be a good complement. That could be another revenue stream. And to your point, as CEO, you abdicate some things and you run off and chase that and see if you can develop it and get it going. Well, in the meantime, some other things have fallen off the edge of the table in what you had going, and it starts to, shudder and shake. And this thing you're chasing may or may not become a reality. And it's a word of caution to owner founders out there to really check yourself for that classic bright, shiny object. Because, boy, it's easy to rationalize how something new and different could fit into your vision, but does it really?
That, especially for a visionary, that I think that those words of counsel are very good. I'm curious, Doug, what would you say, like, when you're advising, other entrepreneurs, what is like the filter to say, hey, listen, this is worthy of my time enough? Is there any sort of filters that you could help, the listeners, and even for myself, I'm curious, where it's like, okay, this is worthy of the company saying, yes, we're going to invest time. I'm going to invest time in it. And it's not like that shiny syndrome there. Is there anything that you would filter, decisions that you would do to make sure that, yes, we're truly, in fact, focusing on the right thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. My answer to that would be, I think it's important for owner founders, when you inevitably start out with this big picture vision you want to do, that's great. And even, people literally do vision boards. They just
Mm.
sort of fantasize and they do some cutting and pasting and they put pictures on the wall to say that's what we want to become. But I think what's more meaningful as the business starts to take shape, and particularly when you start expanding the team, you have to do the work to lay down the foundation of mission, vision, and value that you want to be about.
Mm.
And you can intertwine those words, mission, vision, and value. I think you can, particularly for small business, you can somewhat intertwine them. But for the company, the founders that haven't done that, they just say, I've got this idea, I'm going to go produce
Right.
X. I think that's where the risk starts to rise up. If you haven't really locked in on that hardcore definition of mission, vision, and value, it makes those decisions harder. If you get the new bright, shiny object, you have no basis to evaluate it because it sounds like a next good thing. But I was interviewing a gentleman yesterday who's actually director and founder of a really strong and wonderful nonprofit that's been around for 16 years already. It's called the Rock Solid Foundation. That's Rock, ROC. They do play sets for kids with cancer. And it's an amazing story, but we got into this discussion, this very question, and he said what they've started doing and have been doing it for a while, when this bright, shiny object opportunity comes up, like it's not uncommon for them to get approached by big corporate giants who hear the mission and they say, that's a noble cause. We'd like to partner with you. How can we do that? And they present their standard, and the company comes back and goes, it's not quite what we were thinking. What about blah? And now they've got this whole new idea and this whole new, seems like an opportunity. Because, if you're in a nonprofit like that and a corporation shows up and says, we're willing to carve out and pay you $1 million a year to put in your fund, what do you think? That's a pretty juicy opportunity. But his point was, what he said was, when we get those opportunities, we immediately go to mission, vision, and value.
Mm.
Is anything about this going to take us off course?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you feel emotionally about the idea. It's the hard test. Does it fit our mission, vision, and value?
Mm.
Now,
Yeah.
guess what? As part of their practice and their culture now, they do annual reviews of what those mission, vision, and values are. So they're willing to test it for how viable and sustainable it can be in the long run. And if they have to tweak it a little bit accordingly, they do.
Mm.
But the truth be told, the more they've looked at it, they had done a really good job in the first place of laying it down. So it hasn't changed a lot in those 16 years. But yeah, that's the kind of test they run against those bright, shiny objects.
Yeah. It makes the decision making much, much easier when you get clarifying your foundation. Stimulate progress, preserve the core, right? That's what Jim Collins talks about. This whole idea of like, keep your values and your mission clear and also stimulate progress. And so I think that's where it's the combo of both. I'm going to add, once you have your foundation, for me anyways, it becomes, if I'm looking at the business, and that's one of the things as a CEO, the think time, there's a really good book called The Road Less Stupid, by Keith Cunningham. When I hear him speak, he's got the wisdom voice like you do, Doug. So he kind of remind me of him a little bit, and the wisdom. And so phenomenal book. This guy, Doug, have you heard of Keith Cunningham? I'm sure you've heard.
No, I haven't.
No?
I'm gonna have to look him up.
He's so his story, he lost 100 million, then gained it back, and he's an accountant, but he knows how to communicate information in a very simple way. And so his whole thesis is that success is less about doing the right things and it's more to do with not doing stupid things. So because, more companies die by indigestion, by doing stupid things and not just sticking with their core business. And so, he talks about this idea of think time 3 times a week, sitting down and thinking as the leader of the company. I realized, Doug, that as I started growing my companies, there was like nobody else was doing any thinking. Like they're thinking, but they're not thinking about where the company is at a 10,000 foot view. And so for me, it became, okay, more clear. I got to zoom up. So that means I can't be busy, 12 hours a day. I need to have schedule and think time. And I need to get very clear when I'm looking at the business, where's the number one constraint? Where's, if the company could talk, what would it say? Alex Hormozy talks about this concept of the theories of constraint, is that the company will grow to the point of the largest constraint, and it won't grow past it. So if you could take all of your attention, all your focus into that one biggest problem, whether it's like you have a weak sales manager, or it's lead gen, or maybe you get enough leads but you're just not converting. If you could focus all your attention on that and go deep on that, then that will allow the business to go to the next level. But it starts with that think time for me. So once you have those values and then you're making decisions on top of that, it's like if you can really dial in your time on that right thing, that's like a high leverage point in the business that I found was like very effective for me.
Yeah. That's reminded me of a friend and colleague I had many years ago who was a world-class sales leader, and ultimately took to the road as a sales trainer. He was president of the National Speakers Association and all those things, a really dynamic guy named Jim Jacobus. And one of the things he talked about was a very simple annual exercise he did personally. He said he did it personally, he did it as a family, and he did it with whatever business he was associated with at the time. It was a simple little test to ask yourself, a couple of questions. What worked well last year? What did we try that didn't work? And what are we good at doing? And then, is there anything we need to add to our tool bag to go to the next level for this new year? And I mean, I probably butchered the phrasing exactly from what he articulated, but that was the spirit of it. And I thought how simple that was, but how powerful it is. And at the same time, when he first told me that many years ago, I flashed back over maybe 30 years of my career, how many organizations I knew about or worked with that missed that very basic fundamental of just asking themselves those very questions. And I think that's what you're saying. You do that analysis to say, not only what do we want to do next and where are we going, but what are the constraints we've got that are holding us back, whether it's people, resources, certain opportunities, product defects, whatever.
Yeah. And I that's phenomenal. And from a planning standpoint, you can if you slow down as a group and actually look and you ask those great questions that you referred to there, it allows you to pivot and say, hey, listen, you know what? We're not getting the traction we thought. And then, to have the humility to say, well, let's change directions. That's hard to do as well. But I'll even go a step and kind of add on a layer, is that we call them after action reviews. Anytime we do, like, for example, we just launched a new deal, 66 units in Georgetown, South Carolina, outside of Charleston. And so we did the grand launch actually today, right before here at noon when we were recording this. And after the call, there was about an hour, we jumped on as a team and we did an after action review. And so we said, what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we do to improve next time? We call them after action. So any sort of like event or any sort of like a project, if you just schedule it in, so after the fact, you can do a review on that item so that the next time you roll out, you can fix those. And that's how, best in the world only gets there because they take one step, on a regular, consistent basis towards that. And that to me, I think you can take that on an annual planning, but you can also take it on a day-to-day on any of the large projects that you do or finish up.
I agree totally, and you're spot on in speaking my language. I mean, I learned that principle in the military. That's what we did all the
Right.
time. Every time there was whether it was a big training exercise or a big mobilization, as it came to a close, you immediately did an after action report, and you walked through. How was our plan? Did we miss anything in the original planning? How was the execution? What did we not plan for that happened, and what did we plan for that didn't happen, et cetera, et cetera. And it is that test of what did we do well, what did we not do well,
Mm.
and the learning that comes from that. And you hear stories today of that. I had the opportunity over the years here doing my podcast. I've had a number of Amazon executives on this show with me, and I've usually tested every one of them when they come on. And test probably is not the right word, but I asked the question. The street lore about Jeff Bezos was this idea of fail fast. And I said, the first one I asked him that question directly. I said, is that a thing? And he laughed. He said, no, that's not true at all. He said, what we said was, don't be afraid to fail, but dot dot dot, you better learn from it. You need to learn from that fail. So how it got translated on the street to failing fast, I think what the spirit of it was, if you do try don't be afraid to try something. If it fails, learn from it and move on.
Yeah.
So you pack all that together and it sounds like fail fast, but none of the Amazon execs I've ever interviewed and asked that question like that phrase. They say, no, we know we're painted with this broad brush in the lore of modern commerce. That's what Jeff said, and he didn't say that at all.
Yeah, no, that's great. Really great insight there as well. And, I kind of, when I look back and I've spoken with a lot of really successful entrepreneurs, and, Doug, you're right in that group there of the most consistent theme or characteristic that I've seen in successful entrepreneurs is the ability to take action and take action quickly. And so, like your story of the amount of action that you've taken all through the years. And I just love one of the things that I took out from our conversation is your ability to just go and ask for counsel or advice from anyone. It's like, if you see a trait in somebody else and you want more of that, you just go and ask them, say, hey, can you give me some counsel, or can you teach me more about this? And so that was something that you didn't think twice. You've done that all through your lives, but the ones that are successful are ones that take action quickly. Now, to build on what you were saying in regards to this needs to be intelligent action. It just can't be just random take action and then just keep hitting your head against the wall. You better think about which step you're going first. Take a second, but don't take days to think about that first step. Really do get all the variables that you have at your fingertips, make that best educated decision, move forward, reflect, learn, study, take another step, because you can read all the books in the world. But I mean, as you start taking steps forward, you start to have reference points to be able to take the key learnings that you're reading about into real context. And that's the fastest way I think you can learn, is by moving along, studying other books around you and taking that, and then moving intelligently, taking the key lessons, and then getting back on the horse and going back at it.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, and I think the point is there's a lot of great wisdom in the books and the streaming messages that are out there today, and all to be added to the toolkit. But at the end of the day, whatever you as a leader in a business embrace, it's got to be yours. You've got to own it. It can't be somebody else's. And I use this in my own leadership coaching, and that is I challenge people to begin the work to build a personal leadership framework. And it goes back a little bit to what we were saying a moment ago about company mission, vision, and value. Until you lock that in and really set it in stone, the ideas you've got about, this is the way I want to show up, this is how I want to lead, this is how I want to be, they're just that. They're this giant cloud of fuzziness going on in your brain, and moment by moment as you think about them, they might be right, and they might be good. But if you haven't really done the work to claim them as your own and put it in writing, it may have a discipline to train yourself and develop yourself on those key values as a leader, you're going to continue to struggle. And as opportunities and decisions come up in front of you, if you don't have that basis, that foundation to stand on, you're likely to be, number one, inconsistent with your decision making, and number two, possibly unintentional and very accidental in it, and not make good decisions along the way. But the more you can do to really lock in on that framework and that sense of your own personal mission, vision, and value as a leader, you're going to be a lot better equipped to go out there and make it happen.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more.
Well, Mark, I know as we anticipated when we were in the green room, this could go on, but we're about up on time for this show. So thank you so much for sitting in. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you can go on, fariscapitalpartners.com. You can go on to, we have another podcast called the Multifamily Investor Playbook. John and I, my business partner, we got on twice a week and we just chat real estate. And so you can go to Faris Capital Partners. You can do search on that and you'll see Multifamily Investor Playbook. And you can also go on fulloutinvesting.com and you can actually find a sample deal of what one of our deals looks like, and then our 10-step full out investing process. You can go to fulloutinvesting.com.
Love it. Well, as always, folks, we're going to have that information in the show notes, so feel free to hop down and mash any of those buttons and check out Mark's work. And the partner he alluded to is also going to be in our stream pretty soon here. We're still in production on that episode, but these are probably going to release pretty close to each other, back to back, I think, more or less. But I'll look forward to that when it gets ready to go. But I think for now we've covered it. And one last time, Mark, thanks so much, man. I knew this was going to be good, and I think it was.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, Doug. Thanks for all the work you're doing.
Yes, sir. And with that, folks, I also want to put a little plug in, remind you, if you want to get a hold of me and talk about your leadership journey and anything you're doing in your business, reach out to me at dougthorpe.com. There's an opportunity to schedule a free consultation, no obligation, no hard sell. We'd just love to meet you and get to know what you're up against, what you're thinking, what you want to do next, and we can talk about that. But for now, I think we've wrapped up and we got it all done. So I'm going to say goodbye. Go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.